Welcome to Bubble Tea Chats. We're your hosts. I'm Tiffany,
And I'm Eunice.
and today we're going to be talking about Lunar New Year's and how our experiences were as children of first generation Chinese immigrants. But before we get started, let's talk about what we're drinking. I have here a peach fruit tea from Yifeng.
And I have the Earl Grey black tea latte from Yifeng as well.
Nice. So now that you know what we're drinking, let's dive into it. Eunice, do you want to share how you celebrated Lunar New Year's?
Yeah, for sure. This year, well, actually, not just this year, we have this annual tradition where we would go to our local Chinese mall where they hold countdowns. So at the mall, there's also some I think night market stands, but indoor. So there's like booths selling flowers and plants and also snacks and treats. So they would have that out, and then also line dance performances and traditional Chinese dance performances. So we would go there every year, mainly because of my mom. She is a big green thumb and she loves plants. So she loves going there for the flower market, and it's we would just love going there because that's great family time for us. And also me and my sisters were very excited about the snacks. So we would, because if there's a food court there, we would always get bubble tea or egg waffle. So we always look forward to that whenever it comes to like Chinese New Year. And
Okay, that's so cool. I never realized these markets even existed. That's something that my parents never took me to growing up, so it's really cool to hear about that.
yeah, I wouldn't have known this if it wasn't for my mom. Apparently in China, they do the flower markets way bigger. Like it's a bigger scale
Oh,
than
yeah, I bet.
what it is at our local mall. But yeah, I guess the tradition for them is that they're getting new flowers to welcome the new year. So the flower markets usually happen about like a week or maybe a bit earlier, leading up to Chinese New Year, and it ends right after the countdown. So in a way, from what I heard from my mom, it kind of sounds like their version of like having a Christmas tree.
Oh, okay.
So you buy new flowers and plants and having it in the house to welcome the new year.
Oh, cool. What kind of flowers would you typically get?
So my mom's favorite is orchids. So there's
Ooh, okay.
orchids, there's lucky bamboo shoots, and it was kind of funny the name, but there's also something called a pussy willow that I saw at the at the flower market at the mall. So there's a lot of those, and there's also a plant that looks like there's a tangerine growing out of it, but I don't think it's an actual tangerine because my mom has it at home and we don't eat it, and I don't think it's edible. So I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it just looks like a orange citrus thing that grows out from the plant.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like in terms of my household growing up, we would occasionally have maybe like a bamboo plant, or I think more commonly we'd have a money tree.
Oh, money tree. Oh, yeah.
Yes, yes. We do have an orchid at my parents' home now that I think about it, but I feel like my parents didn't really make this like a tradition in terms of Lunar New Year's.
Yeah, my mom just loved plants, so it's a great tradition for us. So we go out when we do some like shopping, I guess, at the mall as well.
Okay.
So that's what we did leading like for Chinese New Year Eve. And then the morning of Chinese New Year, my mom would make us, it's called white radish cake. And actually, my uncle made it. And then my mom just cooked it. But my uncle actually works at a dim sum restaurant. So like his white radish cake is like really good.
Ooh, I bet.
Yeah, I would love it, especially when it's pan fried. It's so good. And we would also have this thing called Chinese New Year sweet rice cake. So it's kind of like mochi brownies, but it's really good fried as well. So there was a time where my mom used to not pan fry things for health reasons. She thinks it's healthier if we don't pan fry things because it's additional oil. So back then she would steam these sweet rice cakes and the white radish cake as well. And I would say I didn't like it as much. But it was such a game changer when she pan fried the sweet rice cake because it tastes so good with the crispy outer layer and the
Oh,
gooey
yeah.
center in the middle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
growing up, I definitely ate this as well. I don't know the English name for it, but we always called it like lingo growing up.
Yeah, lingo.
And every year, my aunt would always make a huge batch, and she would cut it up and then divvy it up to all our different family members. And I think for me growing up, my parents always made sure to pan fry it. So I get what you mean about the crispy outer with like the chewy inside. I always loved that dessert growing up.
Yeah, it's so good. Have you tried it just steamed?
No.
Yeah.
I can't really imagine a steam because I think I'm just so used to pan fried lingo that it seems kind of weird to me or the concept of just like steaming something. 'Cause I
Yeah.
think it'd be quite soft overall.
Right. Yeah, it's like very gooey and sticky. You're not missing out. It's definitely better pan fried. Yeah.
Okay.
So we had that for breakfast, and I'm not sure if maybe it's just my family that has it for breakfast, but it's interesting because it's called a cake. So I'm not sure if it's a dessert or like do you eat it anytime during the day, or is it more like a breakfast for you as well?
I think when I think back to my childhood, we would just eat it whenever, honestly. I think we ate it actually more of a snack.
Oh, interesting.
It wouldn't be for a certain meal, just whenever we wanted to have it, we would get to have it.
I think my mom started making that for breakfast. Maybe it's just easy to
Yes,
do, and in the morning it's like less hectic. So it's just like, okay, here's this. So I usually have that for breakfast, and then for lunch I made dumplings with my mom. So it's nice bonding time. It's I've always been a little bit self-conscious about my dumpling making skills because compared to my mom, my dumplings don't look as nice as hers. Like it's really hard to make it symmetrical.
Oh, yes, with all the pleats.
Yeah, with the pleats. Yeah.
Speaking of dumplings, so for Lunar New Year's, my family, we didn't do any dumpling folding. Instead, I actually decided to host a little thing with my friends to have a little dumpling making party. And when you talk about dumpling folding, it kind of is funny to me because my husband is actually really proud of his dumpling folding skills. He definitely has, I think out of the group, he definitely had the nicest pleats compared to anyone. But it was really fun with my friends. We decided to watch a YouTube video about all the different ways you can possibly fold dumplings. And there are a surprising amount of ways you can fold dumplings. Yeah.
How did your husband make the pleats? So, was it like multiple pleats or was it like a few?
He did the technique where like you kind of start from like the outer edge and like on the right and then the left. So there's definitely like multiple pleats per side.
Yeah. I do that something similar, but I just have 3 pleats. But because it's just 3, it's so hard to make it center. So it would be a
Oh,
bit
yes.
off-centered for mine. Yeah, I think it's so interesting to see people have different dumpling making techniques, I guess, like for the pleats. Because for my sisters, we all have different dumpling making skills and designs for our dumplings. Like one of my sister, not that it's a race, but sometimes it's like, oh, who can make the dumplings the fastest? And one of my sisters, she just made like 1 pleat and then called it a day. And I'm in my head, I'm like, that's like cheating.
Yeah, I think that's cheating too.
Yeah. And then my other sister, she kind of like pushes in the outer end and then pushes it down. So then in a way, it's like 3 pleats, but the middle part is more centered. So it's
interesting.
really interesting. It looks different. So whenever my dad eats the dumplings, he actually knows who made what because of how the pleats were done.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, he'll be like, okay, this sister made it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a technique for sure. Yeah. But I would have to say like my mom like makes it really really nice. She does a really good job.
I
But
mean, she has decades of experience
yeah,
at this point.
it's so nice. It's like multiple pleats and it's centered. So
Definitely a skill to have to fold dumplings.
yeah, so I had that for breakfast. I mean lunch, and then for dinner. So after when COVID happened, I mean before COVID happened, we used to go out to restaurants and eat a lot, and we would have Chinese New Year dinners with extended family as well. So with my cousin and everything, but this. Ever since COVID happened, my family has been doing just takeout, and we've just been having Chinese New Year dinners at home and just with my family, so we wouldn't have cousins over or anything. So that's what we did this year as well. We got barbecue pork and roasted pork at home, and we would just have that there. I kind of missed the big dinners though, like so with my extended family and my cousins, because it was also great catch up time as well. I actually don't see my cousins that much, so I used to always look forward to Chinese New Year as well to just catch up with them and see how's life going for them, right?
Yeah, actually, for my family, we still have those giant Chinese New Year dinners. This year, we went to a restaurant out in Vancouver. It's actually my grandma's like go-to restaurant when it comes to these like 10-course Cantonese type of meals. So our dinner included things like abalone, shark fin soup, crab, lobster, the works. And it's funny because when I was younger, I think I didn't have an appreciation for these foods and how expensive these meals actually were.
Yeah, they're expensive.
Yeah, they're actually like over $100 per person. And that is the cost of a wedding meal. So that's crazy to me that, because on my side of the family, we actually have these sort of 10-course meals every time there's a special occasion. So as a kid, I had no idea all this money was being dropped on these dinners.
Yeah, they're expensive. Did you have the abalone too? And
Yes.
stuff? Oh,
yes,
yeah.
we had abalone, but I'm honestly not a fan of abalone. I think for me, I really care about textures of food. And for abalone, like I tried it this time around and it was too tough for me. So I was not a fan of it.
Interesting. I actually I do like abalone, but only if it's made at a restaurant. More so because of like the texture. For some reason, my mom's tried to make it at home a couple of times, but it's also like really hard when she makes it. So I think it's a bit finicky to work with abalone actually. So maybe there's a specific cutoff time where it's just you can't cook it for too long, or else it
Right.
gets too hard. So I don't like it too much when my mom makes it, because it gets too hard and the flavor doesn't really soak in. But I love it at the restaurant because to me it's way more tender, and I love the gravy around it, and also the snow tip peas. They're so good. That's
Oh,
actually
yes.
one of my favorite parts.
That's actually my favorite too. I don't love the abalone, but the snow tip peas are right up my alley.
I also really like the lobster noodles. That's one of my
the
favorites.
garlic buttery sauce over
Yeah.
noodles. Yes, so good.
It's so good.
Yeah, I think my only issue with these dinners is, although the food is delicious, these dinners last way, way too long, especially around this time when these restaurants are packed with people because every other family is celebrating Lunar New Year's. I think this dinner this time around, it was definitely well over 3 hours that we spent at the restaurant waiting for food.
Yeah, it does take a long time. But actually, that makes me remember something I used to do. So like for my family, so each last name is kind of like a village. So there would be someone from a village that create these restaurant gatherings, I guess, like hangouts, or like
It's like a society.
yeah,
right?
like a society, kind of like, should I call it a gala? I mean, I guess like, so they charge you like a ticket to go to the restaurant. So it's like those 5-course, 10-course meals as well. They charge you like $50 per person for a ticket, and you're only invited if you're in that same village. So someone from your village would have to organize that first. But I used to love going to those because of the food. And also, I would always look forward to the raffle draws. So at the end of the night, there's always like some prizes, and there's like a raffle draw.
What kind of prizes would they be?
Usually, there's always a TV, and then
Oh
like
my gosh,
some
that's a big prize.
yeah, and then also some vacation ticket. So nothing too crazy, but maybe like a trip to Victoria or something like that.
Oh, wow.
So they would have like trips too. But I don't remember winning any big prizes, but we definitely have won some household appliances in the past. Yeah, that was
wow.
really exciting.
That's a good incentive for attending these dinners. Because I feel like you mentioned the ticket is like $50 per person.
Yeah.
That's still pretty good value considering the price of these dinners are actually quite expensive normally.
They are, but I haven't been to one recently, so inflation may have happened. But this is like back then, $50. So
Oh,
maybe
okay.
right now it's more like closer to your 100.
Yeah, honestly, with inflation, probably.
Yeah, but it's interesting how like everyone because back in China, if you have the same last name, you live close by to each other. Actually, you're like
Right.
in that village. So it was also like interesting to see my parents interact with people from the same village, because they'd be like, "Oh, hey, I remember you," blah blah blah, and I would just be
okay.
sitting there. I wouldn't know anyone, but I would just enjoy my food. But it's so interesting that like it seems like such a small world, because they
Yeah.
used to live in China. Now they're
Yeah.
here.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's just so interesting that to me that what connects them is the last name and the village.
Yeah.
So I think that was really interesting.
Yeah. My parents never took me to the Choice Society, but that's really interesting to know that, something like that even exists. So another important aspect of Lunar New Year that we can't forget is, of course, Red Pocket. And this was actually my husband and I our first time giving out Red Pocket because we just got married this past summer and usually we're on the receiving end. So it definitely hurt our wallets a little bit. And we were debating how generous we wanted to be. Because I don't know if you did this, but growing up as a kid, not that it really mattered, but I would definitely take mental note of which aunties and uncles were a little more generous than others.
I was definitely that kid. I would make a mental note, and I have this aunt that in particular that gave out way more than my other aunts. So she was definitely the cool aunt in my eyes.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes me feel better about, I guess, being generous this year. Another thing I didn't realize was that talking to some of my other friends is that in their household, once they're married, they actually give Red Pocket to their parents as well.
That's interesting. I didn't know about this.
Yeah, because for me, the expectation is always that, you only give Red Pocket to those that are younger than you and not married. So I never even considered giving it to my parents, whereas my parents have always been the ones to give it to me. And even after I'm married now, they still give it to me.
Oh, interesting. I'll have to ask my mom about this. I wonder if it's a house rule for like a family, or is it like everyone where like after you marry you have to give a red envelope to your parents.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like every household and changes the tradition a little bit, and it kind of just I don't know what the actual original rules are, but it
Yeah.
seems like everyone just kind of adapts it to their own household.
Did you know that it's bad luck to open your red envelope the day you receive it? So you're actually supposed to wait a day after you receive it.
Oh, interesting. Okay, my parents, I think in general they're not that superstitious, so they never really told me this growing up. So I definitely always opened my red envelopes like the minute I got home from the dinner.
I think maybe my family or my parents are a bit more superstitious than your family because I would learn about these things through them.
Oh, okay.
And maybe it might also kind of like be a house rule and it's varies between families and in terms of like how long that duration is. So for my family, you have to wait a day. But I've also heard online that some people wait like till the seventh day or the 15th day. So
Oh, wow.
I think it varies. But for my family, it's like we have to wait a day. So we never know until the next day.
Oh, interesting.
Another superstition that my family, that my mom always tells me is that on New Year's Day, you're not supposed to wash your hair because it washes away your luck.
Oh, yes, I've definitely heard of this one. My parents didn't enforce it growing up, but I've heard this from like other families.
And also with the number 4, it's actually bad luck because it sounds like death in Chinese. So you'll never really receive a red envelope with like $40 because like it's just bad luck. And even in some buildings that are developed by Chinese developers, there's like no 4th floor or like 14th floor for that
Yes,
matter.
I've definitely noticed that. I think for my parents, we definitely try to avoid having the number 4 in anything like our license plate. And on the opposite, because I know one of the superstitions is that 8 is a very lucky number. So my dad would always try to incorporate 8s in our license plates or phone numbers, etc.
Yeah, so it's interesting how for Chinese culture, numbers come into play, but actually also colors. So I didn't know this until I was, I think, in grade 5 or 6 when I wanted to buy a white headband. But my mom was really against me buying and wearing a white headband
Wait,
because
so you couldn't wear any white at all in your wardrobe?
no white on my hair specifically. So like a hair
Oh, okay.
accessory. So I wouldn't have any white scrunchies or like hair clips or headband because apparently in Chinese culture, white is a mourning color.
Right.
So in Western culture, the color that people wear to funeral is black. But for Chinese people, we wear white. So having something white on your head back then in the culture is it's like when you're going to a funeral. So then my mom didn't like it and she was like, no, don't wear that color.
Yeah, I think the color thing is so interesting to me because, in like Western culture, you always wear like a white wedding dress, right? And I find it interesting because I wonder if like Chinese families, when they attend weddings of their own children or other, family members, is it weird that like white is such a big, like, it's a color of celebration, right?
I think it's evolved now because a lot of people wear white wedding dress, but traditional Chinese wedding, they actually wear a red capo, so like a red traditional Chinese dress. So they still like the color red.
Oh,
So
yes.
and but I think they also don't mind the white wedding dress as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I feel like talking about these traditions and just like our Lunar New Year celebration, it kind of makes me think about just growing up in a Chinese household. So that kind of brings us to our, next point. Eunice, how did you find it growing up as a child of a Chinese immigrant? Were your parents strict growing up?
I think my parents were kind of like in the middle of the spectrum where they're not super strict, but they're not super lenient either. For example, education is still really important. So they focus a lot on my grade. There's a huge emphasis on report cards. My mom would keep tabs on when we're supposed to release the report cards. Like, I never try to hide it from them. Every time I get a report card, I'll give it to them. But they still kind of keep tabs on like when they would come out. So like, I don't know, are they expecting me to not tell them or something? But I guess maybe some people do that, but I always just show it to them. So grades were really important.
Yeah, same for me in the sense of like my parents definitely put an emphasis on the importance of working hard and getting good grades. But they weren't super strict compared to some of my other friends, where I feel like my parents didn't force me to study. They didn't force me to have tutors or any of these like extra like tutoring services outside of school. I feel like I just, for some reason, I kind of pushed myself to study and I motivated myself to do well. Where I don't know if my parents were just less strict or did they just not need to intervene because I was already doing well in school.
How about for your sister? Do you know if they were more pushy in terms of education for your sister? Or was she always also like you, where it's more like internal motivation?
She was similar to
Okay.
me. Honestly, we were both pretty studious, good kids. So I feel like kind of my parents kind of had it lucky because they didn't need to enforce any rules for us.
Oh, nice. Did you have to go to Chinese school?
So my older sister did, but I did not. I don't know if it was me being really like resistant to Chinese school, but my parents overall, they're not very strict. So because I really didn't want to go to Chinese school, they just kind of let me be.
I actually went to Chinese school all the way up to grade 12.
Oh, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, but then it's a bit weird because in elementary school, my school actually offered Cantonese lessons after school in the same elementary school. So I would just stay at school longer and it'd be Cantonese. But once I went to high school, I had to go to a different school. So I went to like a college that had Chinese lessons, and then I started learning Mandarin. So
Oh, wow.
it's a bit weird because it was a switch up. So I felt that it was a bit hard to keep up with it. It was harder for me to stick. So for it to stick on me. So to be honest, I didn't find Chinese lessons that valuable.
Oh, interesting. Did you resent your parents for making you go?
I don't resent them, especially nowadays. I do wish my Chinese is better. It's just that at the time, for some reason, I feel like going to Chinese school didn't help because it was just once a week. And
Right.
I don't think it was very in depth either. Like a lot of people, because it's like outside of school and the report card doesn't really matter, a lot of people actually cheat in my class. Like
I've heard that.
every time we have an exam, not that I'm cheating, but I look around the classroom and people are like obviously cheating, but the teacher doesn't care because it's just like a extracurricular. So yeah, it was a bit hard to keep up with Chinese. But I also find that when learning a language, it's best to learn in that country. So that's why I wanted to study abroad in China actually, so then I can
Oh, okay.
improve on my Chinese. Because actually, when I was in grade 10, I went to a French immersion program.
Oh, wow.
And it was so helpful because I was immersed in the culture, and the only thing I can speak is French because if the teachers heard us speak English, we'll get detention or like a red card.
Wait, where was this program?
Oh, it's in Quebec.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. I've heard about
Trois-Rivières.
this.
Yes.
Yes.
So it was really fun because in that summer, my French improved so drastically. Like it was way better than my 4 years in high school because I was taking French in high school. So it was I think the best way to learn Chinese is actually to go to that like country and learn Chinese.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
What about in terms of like having curfews or like chores? How were your parents in regards to that?
Oh my gosh, I had to do a lot of chores back then.
Okay.
Yes.
Like, what did you have to do?
Basically, I did all the dishwashing. So, like, I had to clean all the dishes. I guess because I wasn't the one cooking because I was young and I didn't know how to cook. But I was always on dishwashing duty, and there were a lot of dishes. So, it was really, really busy. And actually, we didn't even start using the dishwasher. Well, I don't want to say we because I used the dishwasher, but my mom didn't start using the dishwasher until COVID started because she learned from her friends that the dishwasher had this sanitation mode. And because of COVID, she wanted to sanitize the dishes. So now she's more open to using a dishwasher. But up until like 2-3 years ago, it was always hand washing. And
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time washing dishes.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like for me, my parents were pretty relaxed about chores, where the only chore I really had to do was my own laundry. When I think back, I think that's literally the only chore I really had to do. Whereas my dad took care of all the cleaning, my mom did all the cooking. So, yeah, I feel like compared to some of my other friends, my parents really didn't enforce a lot of rules. And even for curfew, I never really had a curfew growing up. So I was used to having a lot of freedom and like staying up late or even on a Friday night if I'm with my friends. Like my parents really only just needed me to kind of warn them like, when I'm going to come home, but they would never like put their foot down and not let me go out. But I don't know if part of this is because like I already had pretty good grades, so maybe they felt like they didn't need to intervene. So I don't really know what would happen otherwise if maybe I was struggling in school or I was, having a little too much fun or partying. I don't know what my parents would have done.
Yeah, I don't think my parents were super strict on curfew either, though my mom would keep calling me, though. Like, there's no, like... Actually, you know what? I think they would prefer if I wasn't out too late, but I think
Right.
maybe I was just being a rebel, but I wouldn't. And I guess at that point when I was young, I was thinking, oh, well, they can't really do anything about it. I'm already out anyways.
Oh,
But, like, my
okay.
mom would actually call me. And sometimes, like, I don't hear my phone because it's on silent mode. So this kind of sucked, but my mom would also call my friends.
Oh,
Yeah, when we're
okay.
out, like, so she'll call my specific friend I was out with, and I would feel bad because I'm like, oh, sorry, I didn't want to annoy my friend, but my mom would call him too. So I guess in a way, curfew was a thing for me, but it was never like officially implemented. Like she never told me that okay, I need to be back by a specific time. Like it was never communicated, but I felt like because from all her calls that she did care about how late I came home.
Yeah, I do understand part of it is a safety thing too.
Yeah.
I think especially because we are daughters, I think there's certain fears that you have having daughters versus sons. So I do get like the concern about safety.
Yeah. Oh, did your parents make you take any musical lessons?
I did violin growing up. I actually wasn't forced to, but because my sister did piano lessons, I wanted to be different but still do something similar. So I took violin lessons on my own will. But the thing is, I never practiced. And because my parents were not strict, they didn't enforce this. So I was honestly like a terrible violin student. And I only took it for a few years before I gave up and quit. What about you?
It wasn't my choice, but my mom put me onto piano lessons.
Oh, okay.
So I think because my mom personally is also very interested in piano, like she's actually learning it right now online, interestingly enough.
Oh, okay.
So that's pretty cool. But so yeah, I think because she was interested in it, she also put me up to piano lessons. And I was taking it, and I feel like I would have continued. But so me and my sisters have pretty big age gaps. And so when I started taking piano, my mom actually was pregnant with my second sister, I guess. And so she wasn't able to take me to lessons anymore. So my piano lessons naturally just ended there because like she wasn't able to drive me to the lessons. But I think I would have continued if she was still driving me to lessons.
So you did enjoy it.
Yeah, I did. I didn't mind it. I enjoyed it, but I do recall that I didn't like practicing songs that I'm not like interested in. I liked playing songs that I've heard. For example, like from Spirited Away, I really liked
Oh,
their
okay.
background song, and I actually printed it out and I tried playing that song, and I think I got through the first half, but I didn't do the last half. But so if it's a song I enjoy, I do enjoy it. It's just that when it comes to lessons, they make you replay a lot of the songs.
Yes,
For example, like
yes.
Chopstick or whatever like that. And like, I think when you're forced to do it repeatedly, it becomes less enjoyable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
But I do like piano for just to enjoy. But I don't know if I like it for lessons. But I do wish I was better at piano so that I can play music that I enjoy.
Yeah.
So I guess it's kind of like a seesaw. You have to do one first before you do the other.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I know it is super common for like Asian households to make their kids take piano lessons. I think piano's the most popular and then violin's like the second most popular. At least that's what I've come across in
Yeah.
my experience. Yeah, in terms of like I guess stereotypical like values or things that our parents made us do, I think generally because my parents were not super traditional, but I think the thing that they did really value was higher education. So in terms of like going to university, it was never an option to not go to university for me. And my parents definitely emphasized on working hard, and like they, I was lucky where they provided like they saved money specifically for me to go to university because that was just like a natural expectation for them.
Do you think they would be okay with you going to college? Or was it like a must? There's no college in their dictionary.
We never talked about college. I think my assumption was always university, and so was theirs. So we just never even talked about the topic of college. I think I did jokingly bring up once when I was younger about what their thoughts are me taking a gap year, and they definitely like shut that idea down pretty fast.
Yeah, I think for my parents too, university was a big thing. Like, we also didn't discuss college, but they were definitely expecting me to go university. And you know what? They actually wanted me to be a pharmacist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm surprised they didn't want you to be a doctor instead.
I think that might be too stressful for me. Maybe, yeah, I'm actually surprised because I know like Asian families, they want either like lawyers or like doctors or like engineers. But yeah, I think because at that time, pharmacists were like, I think it was like booming. A lot of their friends have kids that are also pharmacists or something like that. But it was even like for me, like without them telling me, I knew that pharmacy was one of the big areas as well. So I think at that time there was a bit of a boom.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. I feel like in terms of programs, my parents, they just wanted me to choose something stable. So I think whether I chose sciences, engineering, or business, they would have been happy with anything that at least has future stable career potential.
How did they feel when you did marketing? I mean, we did marketing because I also had, my parents were also like that. They were worried about my career, more so about stability. And so, like, when I got into business and I was interested in marketing, my mom was definitely worried because, like, marketing is supposed to be, like, not very stable because when there are budget cuts, the first team they would cut is usually, like, sales or, like, marketing. So my mom, out of all the concentrations in business, she actually preferred that I went into accounting because it was more stable.
Okay. Yeah, my degree is actually in accounting and marketing. So I chose accounting first. And then over time, I realized that I didn't really see myself pursuing a career in accounting and I wanted to explore marketing. And my dad was an accountant. So he was always happy, I guess, that he was happy for me to pursue a career in accounting. But at the same time, because he worked in a very corporate environment, I think he also didn't mind me going into marketing because he saw that there is potential to move up in marketing as well. So they're overall pretty supportive. I think as long as they just wanted me to choose like a stable path, and for them, if I worked in marketing at a large company, I think that would give them that same reassurance.
I see. I'm actually really surprised. It's my first time hearing about that because we actually met working together in marketing.
Yeah,
So for some
yeah.
reason, I was under the impression that she graduated with a marketing degree. So it's like, oh, it's really cool that you also have an accounting side as well.
Yes. I think I just want to talk about my accounting side because I really never did any sort of work experience in accounting. So I can't even say I know really anything practical about accounting because I literally never worked a day in an accounting job.
Do you like file your own taxes then?
I mean, yes, but I wouldn't say I'm like an expert in
Oh,
it.
okay.
Yeah.
That's a good skill.
Yes, it is. It is a good skill for sure.
How about for like games? I know like some Asian parents are very strict about going on the computer for too long or playing video games. So outside of school, was there anything where your parents were like, "Oh no, you can't play too much of this"?
Not at all, actually, because growing up, I actually had my own computer in my bedroom. So I had my own personal computer that I could access at any time.
Yeah.
And they didn't really put any restrictions. I think once again, it's because my grades were doing well, so they didn't really have a reason to intervene. So honestly, I spent a lot of time on the internet. Like during my high school days, I spent way too much time on MSN, and I would stay up super late until like 3 a.m. on a school night just chatting on MSN. So they definitely had no rules there. Did you?
Yeah, like my parents were pretty strict about using the computer for too long. I remember this might outdate us, but I remember for internet connection, we had to do it through the phone line.
Oh my gosh, like dial up
Dial up.
internet?
Yeah. So back then in elementary, I actually spent a lot of time on Maple Story.
Oh my god, I did have a Maple Story phase
Yeah.
as well.
So I would spend a lot of time there, and I remember my parents would like unplug the internet cord.
Oh, to make you stop.
Yeah, to make me stop. So I guess that's their way of letting me know that, okay, enough is enough. No more games. But I'm normally not really a gamer. I think ever since like Maple Story, I haven't really played any other games.
Right.
I think it's like a elementary phase. But yeah, that was the only game that I spent a lot of time on.
Okay.
So it sounds like the level of strictness differs between our parents. How about school? What is it like for you?
Well, I think for me, growing up in elementary school, our school was kind of a mix between, we had a lot of Chinese kids and Italian kids specifically. I think just based on the neighborhood we're in. So in terms of my closest friend circle, a lot of us were like CBCs, or were like Chinese, but like born in Canada. So we grew up like a little more westernized. And I think as a kid, I really kind of felt disconnected from like my culture. I really did not want to eat any Chinese food. I hated dim sum, never wanted to bring any sort of Chinese food to school, and I didn't really listen to any sort of like Chinese music. So I actually feel like, and I really feel disconnected from my culture at that time, and I didn't even want to speak like Cantonese at home. I think so. Like when I was born, my parents actually taught me Cantonese first. So Cantonese at one point was like my primary language. But then once I entered the school system, I don't know. I think part of me just wanted to fit in with the schooling like in Vancouver, and I just stopped speaking Cantonese. And for my parents, because they actually both speak English fluently, and they didn't really enforce for me to speak Cantonese at home. So I really lost touch of my language really early on in my childhood.
Yeah, for me, I at my school, there's actually a lot of Asians as well. So I guess growing up, I didn't feel like super different because a lot of people that I was around were also Asians. But for some reason, I really didn't like my lunches in elementary school. So my mom would have have a thermos, and she would pack like dumplings or like noodles in there. But I don't know if it's because it's food sitting in the thermos for too long. But I didn't like how like when I open my thermos during lunchtime, there's this smell.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
it kind of smells bad.
Yeah, yeah.
So I would be like a bit embarrassed about my lunch because I know that there were other Asian kids that I hang out with too, and they don't have like Chinese food for lunch. They would have like a sandwich or like pizza.
Oh,
or
that was
like,
me. Like, I only wanted to bring sandwiches or wraps for lunch.
And that's also what I wanted. Like I'm like, why do I keep having this? I just wanted like a sandwich or something. But I guess now that I understand my mom a bit more, I think for her it's more so, oh yeah, maybe she thinks it's more healthy or something like that. But back then, as a kid, a kid in elementary school, I didn't like how my lunch smelled different from other people's lunch. So I wanted to have similar food as everyone else.
And did you ever request this from your mom?
You know what? I don't think I did. Because I think growing up, I was a pretty understanding kid. I didn't want to. I I know my mom was having a hard time, so I didn't actually specifically request that food.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. That's very kind of you because I think other kids might have behaved differently.
She was also having like she also had to like handle my newborn sisters too at the time because of the big age gap. So I didn't really want to put more on her plate because I understand how difficult it was because I also had to take care of my sisters at that
Right.
time. So yeah.
Okay.
And for me, I was actually put in ESL in the beginning because Chinese was actually my first language,
Oh,
specifically
okay.
Cantonese. So I think like anyone whose first language was not English, they put us as a English as a second language program. So in addition to the regular curriculum, you're taken aside to a separate class where they specifically teach you how to like read and write English. So I think as a kid, I couldn't wait to get out of ESL because I
Oh,
felt a
okay.
little like embarrassed for being there because
Right.
not a lot of people in my class were in ESL.
Oh,
So
okay.
when they call your name and you have to leave, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I have to go to a special class kind of thing. So I remember wanting to improve on my English so that I don't have to be taken away.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely get that because I think, if most of the kids are not going to ESL, you kind of want to fit in with everyone else. And I think as a kid, you just like, it's more important to fit in. So I definitely understand why you felt that way.
Yeah. And even though I did want to like improve on my English and everything, there was a turning point for me, which was in grade 5, where I appreciated my Chinese culture a lot more. So it was a trip that I went with my dad to China. So we went to Guangzhou and Beijing and Shanghai and we did a whole bus tour. But through that trip, I was in grade 5. It really immersed myself into the Chinese culture. And that's when I started getting into like Chinese songs as well. Like Jay Chou
Oh,
was big
okay.
then, and Jolien Tsai. And also I liked Gem as well. Well, I guess that's later on in high school. But it got me interested in Chinese and also speaking the language. So I think that was a turning point for me in grade 5 where I reconnected with my Asian roots. And then sometime in high school, I I started listening to other music and then went back to English songs. So it's kind of
Oh, okay.
interesting. But I also always appreciated the Asian side, and I like improving on my Chinese because to me it's kind of like a secret code. Like for example, if
Yeah.
you're at a restaurant, you want to say it doesn't taste so good, but you don't want to say it in English. It's like a secret language to be like, oh yeah, it's not that great.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's interesting that you had, yeah, that experience where you really like embraced your Chinese culture. I think for me, and I think this is something I still kind of like struggle with today, is sometimes I feel a bit disconnected from my Chinese culture still. So, for example, like in high school, I did notice some of the other Asian kids would actually listen to not just Chinese music, but like K pop. K-pop really grew in popularity recently, but back in high school, there was also some people that got really into it.
Yeah.
And I just never really embraced that side. I felt like I just wanted to like distance myself from anything that I felt was like Asian. And I can't really explain why because there were definitely enough Asian kids in my school where I didn't stick out. Like I was never bullied. The Asian kids were not specifically bullied, but it almost felt like I just wanted to be more, I guess, westernized in that sense.
Interesting. I think for me, maybe another reason why I'm embracing more of my Chinese side as well is because I'm the oldest in my family, as the child of like a first generation immigrant. Like I'm the eldest child, so I'm kind of like the translator. So I have to maintain my Chinese to a certain level because even up to this day, I speak to my parents in Cantonese. Because the thing is, even though they immigrated here, they actually haven't, their English hasn't improved that much. I think because like here, there's such a big Chinese community that maybe they feel like there's no need to really like know English to get
Right.
by because there's just such a big Asian population. So I've actually ended up being kind of like a translator for my parents and my sisters because me and my sisters, we have a really big age gap. They grew up, so there's three of my sisters. So they grew up speaking English to each other. So naturally, their Chinese is not as great because they were
Right.
just speaking to each other in Chinese. And then for my parents, they speak Chinese to each other. So I end up being the bridge for the both of them. So yeah, I'm always like the natural translator. Like whenever it's kind of funny because sometimes when my sister and my parents get into an argument, I'm kind of like there to translate because they won't understand
Oh,
each other, and
yeah.
I'm like, this is what they're saying, this is what she's saying. So that's pretty funny. But even for letters too, like my mom would receive letters in English, and I'm always the one translating it.
Yeah,
And
I
I
do think
think,
it's a
yeah,
common like role that like the child of like a first generation immigrant
mm-hmm,
plays is being the translator.
mm-hmm,
And it's funny because I didn't personally need to do this because my parents spoke pretty fluent English, and I think a lot of it is due to like the working environment as well. Like my mom worked in the hospital environment, where even though when she first immigrated to Canada, maybe her English was not great, but because of her work environment, she was forced to learn and practiced a lot. So, yeah, my parents never really needed translating service, but some of my friends would complain about how they felt like they had to deal with all these like adult like things
mm-hmm,
as children
mm-hmm.
because of that language barrier and their parents not speaking English.
Yeah. And I also wonder if it's maybe a difference into like being the eldest because you have an older sister. Do you find that she had to do more of like the translating, or maybe not translating in your case, but yeah, do you think her Chinese is better?
Well, yes, her Chinese is definitely better. I think for me, being like the younger child, growing up, I had my sister to talk to in
Mm-hmm.
English. Whereas I think for you, you only had your parents
Yeah.
for a period of time. Actually, I guess for a long period of time
Yeah.
because there is a big age gap.
Such a
So
big
you
age gap.
practiced your Chinese for longer,
Mm-hmm.
and your siblings had you and each other to talk to in English.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because me and my sisters, we have like about a decade age gap. So I guess like the first decade of my life, I was kind of like a single child. So like the people I would talk to is just like my family members. So I think that helped a
Mm,
lot. But I feel like in recent days, it hasn't been that great. So my future plans is to like try to improve on it,
improve on.
on my Chinese.
Oh, okay. Is it your Mandarin or your Cantonese or both?
It's interesting, but I both, but more so Mandarin.
Oh,
Because I
okay.
actually heard that Cantonese is going to being a it's a dying language. So apparently, in a couple of years, the language would no longer exist because now people in China are expected to know Mandarin. So like people at school, they teach everything in Mandarin. So it's kind of interesting. I hear from my mom because my mom have relatives in China where like her friends would speak Canto and they still know some Mandarin, but their kids speak Mandarin. Like they don't know
Mm,
Cantonese. So it's
yeah.
interesting. So it's a little like maybe language barrier for them,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's really minor because I think if you know Cantonese, it's not too hard to decipher what someone's saying in Mandarin.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I've also heard that Cantonese is a dying language. But I do find that there are people, I think people that are really fluent in Cantonese actually have a much easier time picking up Mandarin. Just because, I mean, I know a lot of the words are similar, but I think because I think naturally Cantonese is harder to learn than Mandarin because we have more tones, that if you are fluent in Cantonese, Mandarin naturally becomes easier to pick up.
Yeah, also heard it's a lot harder, vice versa. So if you know Mandarin, it's harder to learn Canto because there's like 9 tones for Cantonese, whereas for Mandarin there's like 4 tones. So yeah, even for myself, to be honest, if I wasn't born into a Cantonese speaking family, I don't know how I would pick up on it because there's like some words that sound the same but they mean different things.
Right, Right.
And yeah, I don't know how one would. That it's just so difficult. You'll have to know the context and everything. Yeah, it's just really. As someone who speaks Cantonese, I do agree. It's a hard language to learn for
Yes.
sure.
Yes. I
Yeah.
think so too. Yeah. Well, that was a little bit about, how our childhood was growing up. I guess taking into account of all our experiences and how our parents raised us, do you feel like, anything that your parents did, you has affected how you live today, I guess?
Yeah, I think how my parents raised me definitely will have a strong impact on my parenting style.
Mm.
I do agree with them that education is really important. So I would also put an emphasis on education. But I think what I would do differently as well is to maybe just have more of a guideline. Because I don't want them to feel like, oh, for example, if they don't make it into university, it's the end of the world. I want them to know that it's more like a kind of like a guideline. So like there's many different paths to get there. So if you don't get into university the first year, I want them to know that they can also go to college for a year and then transfer. Because that's actually something one of my sisters is doing right now. She's out of college, but then she's transferring next year.
Oh, okay.
So like the end goal is still the same, but it's a more hopeful perspective as opposed to being okay, you must do this, you must do that, because I think it could be a little discouraging for a young child. So I and then in a way, if you go to college first and then you transfer to university, you do save a lot of money for that first year.
Yeah, I
The
know. I think that
tuition is there
is.
significantly different.
Yeah, I think that's a really practical choice. I actually do know of some people at our age when we're going into university, they actually purposely chose the college route because it is a lot cheaper and because you can transfer into university. In the end, you still get the same bachelor's from a well known institution, but it's significantly less than someone who just went straight to that university.
Another thing I want to continue doing and that I've learned from my parents is like the Chinese language. So actually right now I'm trying to like learn Mandarin through Duolingo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so my partner is actually Sri Lankan, and we're actually both trying to learn Mandarin so that our when we have a kid in the future, we can teach our kid Mandarin.
Oh, how's that going for him? I feel like it must be pretty challenging.
Yeah, I think even though Mandarin is also a bit new to me because my I guess main Chinese language is Cantonese. It's definitely a lot harder for him to go from English to like Mandarin as opposed to me Cantonese to Mandarin. So right now we're both doing Duolingo. So I think it's helping him pick up on keywords. But I think maybe we do need to take some formal lessons to get to that conversational level. So he can pick up on certain words right now, but just like we haven't gotten to a point where we can carry a conversation yet, like a full on
Right.
conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that will definitely take some time. I think
But
in terms of language, like I do feel a little bit sad in a sense. So my husband is Taiwanese and he does speak Mandarin at home, whereas I speak very limited Cantonese. And in terms of our future children, I sometimes think about like, are we going to enforce them learning a second language? I think ideally it'd be nice, and I would probably want them to learn Mandarin just because I think it's going to be more practical for them growing up. But I do think it's really hard to really make them adapt that language unless it's spoken a lot at home, which I guess is why you and your
yeah.
partner are learning it. But for, let's say, for example, for my two nieces, my sister wanted them to be able to understand and speak Cantonese. So their requests, whenever either side of the grandparents babysitted my nieces, or sorry, babysat my nieces, was that they would only speak in Cantonese at that time. So my nieces, they're at the point now where they can understand some Cantonese, but they can't really speak it. I think it's because they weren't really forced to speak Cantonese in their like home environment and only when they're with grandparents. That it's just not enough exposure to Cantonese for them to fully like adapt that language.
I do believe that the household needs to be speaking that language in order for them to pick it up. Although that makes it a bit pressuring for me and I guess my partner as well, because I'm worried that if we don't get our Mandarin to the level of proficiency that we're teaching our kid like broken Mandarin, and I don't want to embarrass them. So it is kind of I guess because it's aggressive goal to suddenly be like, hey, I want to learn Mandarin. But that I really do think that having a second language is an advantage though. So that's why I really want to continue speaking Chinese. And another side of me is that I love how it's kind of like a secret language. So like if you're at a store or if you want to say it's too expensive or like it's not great quality, I don't want to say it in front of them in English and be like, oh, this sucks. But it'd be nice if I can like say it in Chinese, and it's kind of like a secret language and secret code that we can just like communicate. I think that's the fun part to me.
Yeah, yeah, I do agree that there's like a fun aspect of learning another language. And I think in the end, it is overall a good thing for anyone to know a second language. I've always felt really envious of others that do speak a second language fluently. And it's interesting because I think if you ever meet people that are like from a lot like different countries in Europe, apparently it actually is super, super common to speak multiple languages compared to, I feel like in North America, if you meet someone that speaks like two or three or four languages, usually people are kind of impressed, especially when you speak like three or more languages. But apparently, I have a coworker from Europe, and she was saying how in Europe it's like super common and like not very impressive. And she always finds it so funny that people are impressed here.
Yeah, it's so impressive when someone knows like multiple languages. I'm like, how does one do that?
Yeah, yeah. I feel like you have to use a different part of your brain, you know?
I think there was a scientific thing where it does use a different part, or like it changes your thinking structure because of the grammar behind it too. For like different languages is a bit different, so it kind of changes your thought. I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, in terms of like how my upbringing affects me today, because my parents were so relaxed with me growing up, I think I'll probably carry a lot of that into when I raise children. But I think, like you said, I will still emphasize things like education and just like good work ethic. But in terms of like freedom, I want like my future kids to have a lot of freedom and a lot of choices as well. And I think in terms of, my personality based on how I was brought up, I guess I feel like I have a lot of confidence in myself to make my own choices. Because I think for some people that were brought up in really strict Asian households where like their parents really dictated everything they did, like I never had that. I had the opposite. I made all my own choices. And I think today I really feel like I have a lot of control in my own life because I know I have the freedom to make my own choices.
I definitely agree with that because it gives them it's like some power over their decisions, and it's quite empowering, right? It's not like, okay, it's not like a cookie cutter plan where it's like, okay, this is what I need to do, blah blah blah. But like as a kid, it's really important to have like agency and like know that you can control your future. That's like really empowering, and it also helps the child build a lot more confidence. So I
Yes.
totally understand that. How about some Chinese traditions? Are there any Chinese traditions that your parents do that you would want to keep?
Yeah, actually, I think about this a lot where, when I have future kids, like what traditions will I try to carry on? I think I'll do the little fun things. Like I'll give them red pocket, I think, and I still want to have, dumpling folding sessions with my future children. But in terms of like any superstitions or any sort of like, those 10-course banquet dinners, I really don't know if I'll preserve those.
I think for me, it's also similar. I do want to keep the tradition of having the red envelopes and the dumplings as well. Superstitions, I'm not sure about that as well because there's no concrete evidence, but I just do it because my mom tells me to. But yeah, I think I feel like I can't do anything more than what I'm currently doing because this is all I'm exposed to right now. So I feel like my level of carrying out the tradition is not too high. It's more so the activities.
Yeah, yeah. I think it makes sense. I feel like as generations go on, you're going to kind of lose more and more of those traditions and culture. So while I do want to preserve some of those things, I do understand it is quite tough, right?
Yeah. Even for my mom, my grandma used to light up incense and we would have to bow 3 times. My mom actually stopped that. So up till my grandma, we were doing it, but my mom didn't continue that moving forward. So I do think sometimes with like, it's a bit sad, but with culture, I think like with every generation, it does change up, or maybe like some parts will be lost, but we do try our best to keep some parts of it. Yeah. All right, so that wraps up our episode of Bubble Tea Chats. We hope this shed some light into Lunar New Year celebrations and growing up as an Asian. Feel free to share your experiences below. We would love to hear about your experiences. And we hope you have a prosperous new year. Bye.
Cheers.